Hi, everyone. Welcome to your latest Carson's Take 5. Ryan and Sonu here. Sonu, the Fed comes bearing gifts is what we're calling this week. The Fed cut interest rates. What was that?
I said this is the season, right?
'Tis the season for some gifts and shopping and buying and spending and keeping this economy going. So the Fed cut interest rates for the third time this year. That's 0.75%. They cut 25 basis points all three times. They cut 1% last year over the course of three cuts also. That's the high level. So we've been having a Fed, so in the last 15, 16 months, it's been cutting. I want to ask you this, though. And we're going to keep this a little higher level, everyone, how we normally talk, but I think it's important. On TV, they told me there was going to be a hawkish cut, but the market rallied and said maybe it wasn't as hawkish. What in the world does hawkish mean, dovish? But what was your take on yesterday, or well, I'll say last week's Fed decision with an interest rate cut?
Yeah, and a hawkish Fed typically implies that this is a Fed that doesn't want to ease monetary policy.
So no more cuts.
So whereas a dovish Fed is a Fed that wants to ease policy and push the economy and economic growth and keep the labor market stable and things like that, right? Whereas a hawkish Fed is maybe what you get in the face of elevated and high inflation. So I think going into this December meeting, everyone was like, we knew they're going to cut interest rates for the third time in a row. And they did that. That's as expected. But I think everyone was trying to parse, all the different views within the Fed and thinking that, maybe they come out with a cut, but they're going to say that, we're not going to cut anymore, or we're really reluctant. Look, the big picture is, as you said, over the last 15 months, the Federal Reserve has cut interest rates by 1.75 percentage points.
Okay.
I don't. It doesn't get more dovish than that, right? I mean, let's focus on the big picture, right? Like, they're cutting rates. How hawkish can it be? And then they came out and said, in fact, they usually give out economic projections once a quarter. They updated the economic projections from what they had in September, and it pointed in a dovish direction.
So what I thought was interesting, too, like you said, there's we're going to keep this fairly high level, something called the Fed dot plots. It's kind of what the Fed thinks might happen, looking at all the different members on the Fed. And I think it only said one cut next year. Is that correct, Sonu?
Yes, the median member projected one cut.
So let's put a pin in that. So one, but then during the Q&A, so there was the statement, Powell's on TV, Jerome Powell, heart of the Fed. He's on TV talking. When he was talking, the market was rallying. Things like small caps and areas that are a little bit more, how do I put it, get more juice if he comes off dovish. Apparently during the Q&A, he was a little more dovish, opening the door maybe for more than one cut, even though that's what the median said. Is that kind of ballpark what we saw yesterday?
Yeah, exactly. There are 19 members on the Fed. We'll try and keep this high level here. But there are 19 members. I
get bored, Sonu, so I know the listeners might. Yeah.
Now, 7 members out of the 19 don't think there will be any cuts in 2026. Okay. But that means 12 expect cuts. So the majority expect cuts to keep the big picture here. And out of the 12, 8 of them expect at least 2 or more 25 basis point cuts, right? So the direction, the tilt is dovish right there. On top of that, they revised their projections for economic growth higher.
Yes.
Previously, in September, they thought, 2026 economic growth is going to clock in around 1.7%. Okay. They upgraded that to 2.3%.
Wow.
Don't worry about the exact numbers here because they'll never get it right. It's the direction that matters, right? At the same time, they projected inflation will be lower, and they projected that the unemployment rate will be steady. And it's in a historically fairly lowish place right now, even though it's been rising, and that's part of the reason why the Fed has cut rates to protect the labor market and prevent the unemployment rate from going even higher. And that's essentially, I think, why we saw a bullish reaction in equity markets. The Fed is projecting stronger GDP growth, lower inflation, and essentially the bet I think the Fed is making is that we're going to get productivity growth. With productivity growth, you can have strong economic growth, low inflation, a strong labor market, and most importantly, lower interest rates.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, but I did watch the Jerome Powell press conference. Everybody, you probably don't want to do that. He was talking about productivity a couple times, but the reality is, how does the market react to the Fed? The Fed can say this, the Fed can do that. The message of the market was pretty positive. And here's one more. We're kind of near the end, Sonu, so one more from me, then one more from you to wrap it up. Well, we took a look. The Fed cut interest rates virtually at all-time highs, right? The S&P 500 is virtually at all-time highs. We found 22 other times, going back to 1980, where the S&P 500 was within 2% of an all-time high and the Fed cut rates. So yes, they can cut rates with stocks near all-time highs. Sonu, 1 year later, drum roll please, stocks were higher 22 times, up like 14% on average. You don't blindly invest because of any one thing. But there's this old saying that I grew up on. A lot of listeners probably remember this one. Don't fight the Fed. If we have an economy that's strong, and we think we might reaccelerate next year, we'll talk more about that word reaccelerate. Just kind of remember that. If we have a better economy and a dovish Fed, that is a pretty bullish elixir for this bull market to keep going. And the stat I just said, 22 out of 22, does little to change that. So, no, we've probably gone plenty long. How do you want to wrap up the latest Take 5 video here?
Look, over the last 15 months, the big picture, the Fed, as I said, has cut by 1.75 percentage points. And this is the time I'm going to go to my wife and say, honey, we can start looking for a car.
Yeah, right? She wanted to get a car a year ago. You said no. Or not, no. You said, let's wait.
Yeah, let's wait. Let's wait a bit. Let's wait till the Fed cuts interest rates. Like, it's kind of sad how my personal life is tied to my professional life, what I do for a living. Yeah. But yeah, no, by next summer, look, we think, here at Carson, at the Carson Investment Research Team, we think rates will continue to go down. The Fed will continue to cut rates at least maybe 2 to 3 times in 2026. And that's the outlook.
Nah,
it's a positive one.
I have a son who turns 16 in October, so we're thinking about buying him a car a little bit before his birthday. Okay. So once you're 15 and a half in Ohio, you can do the driving with your parents. So I'm in the same boat as you. I was like, let's just wait. We're not getting a car yet. Maybe let's cut a few more times here and go from there. So everyone, we put together a special image on the YouTube channel right now. We'll share the image of Jerome Powell bearing gifts dressed as Santa Claus. We'll put that up there. A fun little playful image of what's going on with Fed policy. So everyone, happy holidays. It's cold. Stay warm. It's snowing. It feels like all the time here in the Midwest. But with all that, things look pretty good out there. We'll be back next week to continue talking about it. We'll see everybody then. Enjoy the holidays. Take care.